There's a term within the cancer world and perhaps other long-term and serious medical diagnoses called ghosting, where people will intentionally or unintentionally just avoid any contact because they don't know what to say or they're petrified of saying the wrong thing. The feedback that we get is our book offers a window into how those people are feeling, what they're experiencing, and perhaps things that are difficult to articulate or questions you don't want to ask. So our book can sometimes give you some of those answers and make it an easier conversation.
8 years ago, a cancer diagnosis rewrote Kevin Donaghy's life. Today, having moved through treatment, he shows no evidence of active disease. Kevin's journey has become about much more than a clinical status. It's an ongoing story of evolving hope. Driven by a desire to light the way for others, he has curated Stories of Cancer and Hope, a collection of voices from the heart of the cancer community. Whether you are navigating your own diagnosis or walking alongside a loved one, Kevin's book shares powerful stories of resilience and courage, drawn from the real experiences of those living with the disease. Above all, it offers a powerful reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is connection, understanding, and the reassurance that you are not alone. Kevin's cancer journey came in 2 waves. The first was in 2018, ending with a stage 2 melanoma removal and a cancer-free diagnosis. The second arrived 18 months later. What started as routine back pain ended with a devastating diagnosis of stage 4 incurable melanoma. After being recommended a course of immunotherapy, which he was told could extend his life, there was still no guarantee of how long that might be. As Kevin shared his diagnosis with his loved ones, the shock began to ripple throughout his family. His thoughts were dominated not only by his own health, but even more so by concern for how his family would cope if his treatment was unsuccessful.
My greatest fear was not about myself. I come from an IT background and a data background, and I did ask the oncologist to show me, some data and some stats. Within the cancer world, there are overall survival graphs which show from the point at which you're diagnosed, potential life expectancy. It wasn't very good. The odds weren't really in my favour. So for me, my greatest fear centred around my family. And if the treatment wasn't successful at the age of 50, how they could cope without me being around. My hope was that I'd be there for a few more years, a few more Christmases. That became a central theme.
As Kevin worked on Stories of Cancer and Hope, he realised that hope was everywhere. Just as he held on to it for his family, others discovered it in their own ways, through small triumphs, meaningful connections, and the courage to keep sharing their journeys. Kevin admits he hadn't consciously thought much about hope before, but while compiling each story, he realised just how deeply it mattered to people.
We have a story from an oncology nurse, and she said something very profound, which we quote in the book, which is, hope is constant. Hope is always there. Sometimes it changes. And within the book, in the introduction, I talk about hope changing colour and texture, and it moves through your journey. If you think there's something wrong with you and you've been Googling, you think, hope it's not cancer. And in my case, it was cancer. Well, I hope I can be treated. I hope I can be cured. If you're then told, sorry, it's not curable, well, I hope I can, my life can be extended. It changes throughout your journey. Hope changes, but it's always there. And your family's hope might be, you might share the same hope with them as well. But within the book, all the stories are amazing because they're told from personal experience.
Kevin shares another story from a woman named Debbie, who was diagnosed with breast cancer shortly after returning from her honeymoon. Terrified, she walked into the treatment room at her local hospital and found herself sitting across from a woman whose fingers were covered in diamond rings. As Debbie stared, the woman noticed and asked if she wanted to hear the story behind them.
She told Deborah that a number of years ago she was diagnosed with cancer and the prognosis wasn't very good. And her husband said that for every year that she survived, he was going to buy her a diamond ring. And she had 22 diamond rings on her finger. That, for Debbie, that gave her so much hope that here was her starting her journey. And this lady, who's obviously still under treatment, 22 years later. That's just one story where people have found hope in very unexpected places.
Receiving a cancer diagnosis can feel incredibly isolating. While cancer affects 1 in 2 of us in our lifetime, being told you have it can feel like it's happening only to you. One thing Kevin noticed was that those who felt they had to be the carrier of hope for their family, often suppressing their own feelings to appear strong, found that sharing their stories with someone who had been through a similar experience could be incredibly cathartic. This was particularly true for many of the male contributors to his book.
There's 12 or 13 different cancer types. People have gone through sometimes similar treatment, but everyone's journey is individual. And what I found specifically with some of the men that I interviewed is they opened up and they told me things that they'd never told anyone before. I was very surprised, but again, coming back to the point where they were talking to someone who'd been through a similar experience. We both had that life experience. Perhaps if I was a journalist and they didn't, I had no personal experience of cancer, they might not have opened up. But having that lived experience connection, and that comes through in a number of the stories.
Maggie's is a charity that provides free, practical and emotional support for anyone living with or affected by cancer. The first Maggie's Centre was built in Edinburgh, which is where Kevin first became aware of the incredible work they do. There are now 27 Maggie's Centres across the UK, usually located next to major hospitals or cancer departments. They are open to anyone who feels they need help coping with the impact of cancer. All royalties from stories of cancer and hope are donated to Maggie's to support their ongoing work.
My relationship with Maggie's happened, sometime further down the line. The day I was diagnosed, there was the option to see a Macmillan nurse as soon as I left the oncologist's office. My head wasn't in the best space. I just walked out. I needed to get out of that place because, that's where I'd been given the bad news. And directly opposite, hidden behind a wall, a Maggie Centre, the very first Maggie Centre that was built in the UK. The relationship with Maggie's came later as I was developing the book. It took me a while to recover from treatment and debilitating side effects. When we were developing the book, the idea was to gather stories through sponsorship, give copies away free of charge. So I just walked into Maggie's in Edinburgh and said, I have an idea for a book. I had nothing to show them. And it just so happened that the person that was available was an amazing man and looked after the Edinburgh Centre. And just explaining the idea to him, within 24 hours, Maggie's came back and said, we'd love to have copies of the book in every centre. Maggie's are there to help with so many different services. They run classes, people coming in to do sometimes alternative therapy. They'll advise on financial assistance that's available. In each Maggie Centre, you have ex-oncology nurses who are there to provide support. They're amazing spaces. If I can walk through the door, my wife, my kids, my family, anyone affected by cancer, you don't have to make an appointment. You just walk in. Someone will come to you, offer you a cup of tea or coffee, and then try and figure out why you've walked through the door.
When your cancer treatment finishes, the story doesn't end there. Caring for your mental health in the aftermath is just as essential as the physical challenge. It's a difficult time, especially when your support system shrinks, just as you're beginning to process the trauma you've endured. Kevin explains that while you're in the system, undergoing treatment, there are countless people to guide and support you through the procedures and side effects. But once the cancer has been removed, or you're in remission and it's under control, that network can disappear.
If you're living with cancer and having treatment, or certainly in my case and some of the other story contributors, you've been through treatment, a theme that comes through is, once you're in the system, once you're being treated, you're having radiotherapy or chemotherapy or immunotherapy, there's so many people there to help and guide you through the treatment and side effects that you have to go through. Once you're out, that stops. And that can be traumatic for a number of people. It's this safety net that, things are being done for you. You go to this appointment, you go here, you get this treatment, and then suddenly you meet your GP or oncologist, say, right, okay, we've done what we needed to do. And you might have to come back for scans in 3 months' time or 6 months' time. But to suddenly be left can be very traumatic. And there's one particular story in the book. Keith, who went through treatment for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, he felt fine during the treatment, but it was the point at which that ended that really impacted him. He had to go for counselling to try and cope with being out of the system and being responsible now for what comes next. It can be quite traumatic once you leave the care.
As Kevin collected stories from people sharing similar experiences of cancer, he began to forge friendships with them. This helped him feel less isolated in his own diagnosis, even as he understood that some of these friendships would inevitably be lost along the way. One contributor who holds special significance for Kevin is Anna. Her story is represented at the start of the book by an artist's impression of Anna, illustrated by Kevin's daughter, Catherine.
Anna was the only story contributor to not see the book produced. Unfortunately, she died a few months beforehand, and I went to her funeral service, which was down on the south coast of England. I was in London, and I was able to go. And at her service, they played a 10-second video of Anna on a holiday she was on holiday in Denmark, and she was living with cancer, but she had a real zest for life. And they were walking past a ship in the harbour in Copenhagen, which was advertising Arctic cruises for 4 days. And she said to her husband, "We're not going home, we're getting on that ship, and we're going up to the Arctic. I want to go to the Arctic." So they did that. They had a couple of friends with them, and they went into an abandoned Russian research station in the Arctic. And there in the middle of the room was a broken piano. And Anna was a professor of music. She taught music. She was a fantastic musician. And she sat down and started playing When I'm 64 by the Beatles. And her husband caught a 10-second video of Anna playing this. And this was played at her service. So bizarrely, Anna was 64 when she died.
Whether you are living with cancer or supporting someone who is, you are never walking this path alone. Beyond the vital support of charities such as Maggie's, there is strength to be found in the shared experiences of others. This is the heart of Kevin's mission. Though his own sense of hope has evolved through every stage of his diagnosis, his latest purpose is to offer that hope to you. Through the pages of Stories of Cancer and Hope, he aims to remind every reader that while their journey is unique, they belong to a community that truly understands.
It can be a very isolating experience. I know from my personal experience, the people who very kindly shared their stories with us. Because at the point at which you're told by a GP or an oncology consultant that you have cancer, it's quite natural to go into shock. At the heart of the book, when we're pulling it together, the main theme is you're not alone. And that's for people who are diagnosed with cancer or for family, friends that are supporting someone diagnosed with cancer. Hope is always there. It may change. It may mean different things. It takes a while for people to process this. Hopefully, by reading other people's stories, it might encourage you to talk to people who are affected by cancer or want to share your story, whether it's face-to-face, through the internet. What you're going through, you're going to find other people who have found something similar. And when you make that connection through reading a story or meeting somebody, it helps. It absolutely helps.